Welcome back. I hope you enjoyed your morning development sessions, whichever ones you were in. And yes, we're on to the panel debate this afternoon. Thank you for those that submitted questions. We've got quite a lot of them here now. And there may be time at the end for more questions, although we've got quite a few. There's just a couple of things I want you to remind you of before we start the panel debate. So it's really important that we respect the views of everybody within the room. And also it's important that we really value personal experience, but also think of things in a bigger context, including the student body, the university, and like nationally as well. Cool. So the title of the debate and what we asked for questions on was communicating expectations around value for money in higher education. So with the recent rise in fees to £9,000 and focus from the government and press and the new HE regulator, the Office for Students, around this, there's been a lot of talk about value for money as well as expectations around that. People see value for money as quite a few different things. So that could be a return on investment as to how much you earn after university, contact hours, the level of support you get, as well as the quality of your education. But essentially, it's in the eye of the beholder. Everyone sees it differently. So we're going to go into some questions, but first of all, I want to introduce the panel. Cool. So you met Sarah earlier. Sarah's the Deputy Vice-Chancellor and Provost at the university, who is in charge of strategic leadership, research and agenda growth, and line manages the heads of schools and other senior staff at the university. We then have Erica, who's Vice President Union Development at NUS, and was a full-time officer at Middlesex Uni as well. She ensures that NUS supports its member students' unions, so like us at Worcester, and that they ensures that we have the tools to support you as students. Her priorities include raising awareness of the work of SUs and making sure we're equipped before and after Brexit, as well as making Totem relevant for students. And then finally we've got Ross, who's the Pro-Vice-Chancellor of Students, who's part of the executive team at the university. Can you tell I got it off the website? I know.
What's my height?
I was going to, and then he has a very long list of responsibilities as well, which includes student experience, widening participation, student success, partnerships, international, resources and employability. So yeah, that's who we've got. So first of all, I thought we'd start off with one question to kind of get to know the panellists. So what I want to know is, what was your experience like at university? So I don't know who wants to start.
I'm
always going to start with Ross.
My experience at university, I found it really exciting but terrifying. So first generation to go to university, so mum and dad left school at 15, so they didn't really have a context of what higher education would be like. So when I arrived, I found it really daunting. My first class was in a lecture theatre, probably twice the size of this. And I also had the imposter syndrome, which I'm sure some of you have heard me say before, but I just felt like I didn't belong and I wasn't bright enough to be there. And hopefully I proved myself wrong, and I haven't quite left university, so I'm still working on it. But I have to say it has been transformative for me, and I have to say that probably if I hadn't been to university, I wouldn't have the confidence to speak to you today in the way I am, and wouldn't have the skills to be able to help and support what you're doing. So it's transformative, but I have to say it was quite daunting as well for us.
Well, so maybe the people in the room that are international maybe would be more, would relate a little bit more with my story of my experience as an international student in the UK. So I come from Macau, China. I don't know if you guys know where that is. It's a small island next to Hong Kong. And it's a former Portuguese colony. I'm half Portuguese and half Filipina. So when I decided that I wanted to go into the UK to study and have a higher education degree, I thought that, I had this expectation that it would have been similar to what I've had in where I was in Macau. But when I came here, I was just I had a bit of a culture shock. So even though that that I sound like I've been, that I come from the United States or something like that, but for me it was a big culture shock. So that's step one of like my journey, the beginning of the journey of me as a student here. Then I studied criminology, but in my first year, I wanted to do music. Because growing up, I used to be very involved in performing arts, and I'm a singer as well. So I looked for extracurricular activities. So then I came in, and these guys, like, they're wearing the t-shirts from your students' unions and all that. I've never heard of a student union before. And then when I saw these guys going around, oh, student unions are great and all that, you've got societies and all that. And if you don't find the society that you want, you can make your own. So I was looking for a singers and musicians society, and I couldn't find one. I was like, that's bizarre. You're in London. I come from a university in London called Middlesex. And I was just like, this is bizarre. So I created my own singers and musicians society, and that's where I really felt that the student union actually created that sort of like student life experience for me, that is not just about the parties and all of that. It's also about what the student union can actually offer to you, whilst also supporting me in the journey that I had, which was, adapting myself into this completely new educational system that is in the UK, very different from what I was used to, whilst also, because I never had to do essays in my life. We had this thing where we just had to write what we thought and memorize. It's a lot about memorizing, but essays is a lot of critical thinking and putting your mind to like what you studied and all of that, right? So it's very different. So I had to adapt to that. So it was a big thing because the student union actually helped me go through that journey. So that was, in a nutshell, that was my experience.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Oh, and I've got several experiences at university. So I'm also first generation university entrant. None of my family had been to university, and I decided at 17 that I was going to apply for a very traditional university. I was told not to bother applying as I probably wouldn't get in. I did get in, and I had a very quite an academically intense first university experience in a very, very traditional university. I loved the work, absolutely loved the work, but it was actually very intense. And then I went back to university as a mature student a bit later, so I wanted to retrain. And I went to a post-92 university as a mature student, as a single mum. And at one point I was trying to hold down a job, do my studying, and it was very, very hard work. But what it gave me, and it was after that experience that I came back into teaching or started teaching. And I think that experience gave me a kind of first-hand understanding of the juggling act involved at university. I think probably over the last 5 years, that has got even harder for students. So I'm conscious that I felt under some pressure at that time, but I think students are under more pressure now. I think you've got different pressures. And that really prompted me to stay in higher education. Believe in widening participation. Everywhere I've worked has been about widening participation, giving people opportunities.
Great. I think that really reiterates that everyone's experience is different of higher education, but actually that you can get so much value from it. So that was really nice to hear. I think we've got a question from Sam now. Sam in the corner there. Great.
Thank you. Please, I would like to find out how you feel the university can effectively communicate what's expected of students and their courses.
So in case anyone didn't hear that, it's how the university can effectively communicate what's expected of students on their courses.
Yeah. Thank you.
Do you want me to, shall I kick off?
Yeah.
I think you've really hit on something which is very, very important, and that's about expectations. And I think there's something really important that we need to do at the start of each academic year, where we have a discussion with our students, probably at course level, and we say to our students, this is what you can reasonably expect. And we also say to our students, and this is what we reasonably expect of you. And it's agreeing those expectations in partnership that I think is really, really important. I think we mean to do that, and I think sometimes we think we have done that. I think probably we could do it much more clearly. And I also think it's something that you need to revisit throughout your course, because those expectations change from the first year to the last year.
Yeah. I think the only thing I would add to that is that the work that we try and do prior to people entering university, so the work with our communications team out into schools, the widening participation work we do, the international team, Sam's our Commonwealth Scholar. So every time I see you, Sam, I always kind of give you a shout out as being a Commonwealth Scholar. It's a massive achievement. It's that work as well of people realising what going into higher education means. And for us, we want people to make informed choices. So being really transparent about it. It's not the easiest path. There's going to be times where it will be tough, and sharing that, and then making sure when you do come here that you know how to get the help and support, whether it be on the academic side, or actually it's some of it around the kind of social or pastoral side where you might struggle. So I think it's that bit about being transparent and not about being overly marketing. So I worked in an institution, I'll not name them, where we did a campaign called You Can Have It All. It was the stupidest campaign you could ever do. It really was foolish, because you can't have it all. It's not that easy, and let's be really honest with people about it. So, and Worcester just doesn't have that approach.
Yeah, and I guess just to add to that, well, obviously this question is more towards your academics, and I'm just more here for the international, or just in general, the student experience. Something that I've realized about the advertisement of universities and how they kind of like sell themselves to students is, in a way, I don't know, you've probably seen it in pictures and all of that, where you have a very, very cultural kind of picture where you have a black student, an Asian student, and you've got the white student, right? So it sells you that picture of this cultural diversity in a university. And there's a lot of universities that actually don't, when these international students come in, they don't actually see that. They're just like, whoa, this is like not, it doesn't really match my demographic. So so that's expectation number one, is like, you know, how do they feel integrated within the student body? And now the other thing is, and I'm going to be very honest, when I was told that, you know, the UK education was going to be great, was because they would tell me, how do I manage to get those skills? So I went into criminology, expecting that I was going to have more prison visits, more of these like very, I don't know, CSI kind of thing. But I actually didn't have that. And then when I sought for advice from academics, they were not very clear with their answers. They would just say, oh, you have to go to the career advice to look for these things. Oh, great, there's a career advice service that actually provides me the guidance. And I went there and they just didn't really give it to me. So I had to look for it myself. So it's how, and I guess I'm just providing my experience on this, is how can the university maybe better those services, and how it in a way connects with the expectation for students. Does that make sense?
And I think that might be a good basis for maybe a next course rep forum, in terms of working together on, you know, laying out the path of your journey and how you can expect things to go at university.
Can I ask a question back?
Yeah.
Am I allowed? So I think it's a really good question, Sam, because I think it goes to the absolute heart of it. What do you think? So it's about, this, I mean, we can talk to you, but actually the more interesting thing is you talking to us. So how can we communicate those expectations more clearly? Or how can we have that sort of dialogue where you're not in a position where you're expecting something and actually academic staff are expecting something completely different? So any ideas, welcome. We don't have to make Sam answer, do we? If other people have ideas. Yeah.
Oh, Abby. Come in.
For me, what I've seen a lot with other students and myself is that a lot of the time that we may be spoken to, and these are the expectations, whether it be assessment, whether it be attendance, or what is available out there, but sometimes it's not in a language that everybody understands. And you know, it can be said very academically, and if you're a new student and you've just been in school straight to college, or you know, or your background is that your language codes and everything may be different,
Yeah.
that you don't quite understand what someone is saying to you. It might just be like, oh yeah, that sounds great, or actually that sounds a bit posh, but I'm not going to admit that I don't understand it. So I think it's about breaking it down and being clear so that everybody gets it, and especially if you have got international students, yes, they may have a good knowledge of English, but when they learn English, they don't necessarily learn all the academic language either.
Yeah.
So they've got to learn, they've got to not just to pick up their English skills, they've also got more to do with learning the academic language as well.
Yeah.
If that makes
That
sense.
is really helpful.
I also think that links quite nicely to our next question from Kelly, school rep in education.
Okay, so how does the university work with local schools and colleges to open up the discussions about value for money?
And expectations.
Are you passing that to me?
Yeah, no.
That's a fantastic question, actually. Do you know what? We don't get lots of questions about value for money from school kids. We really don't. And it's something I ask. And we've got Val Yates is in the room, who involved with our National Collaborative Outreach Programme, which targets students who have got the academic ability to go into university, but have various barriers. And some of it might just be kind of a mental barrier about coming into. We don't often get those value for money bits. I think some of it is about understanding the practicalities of how you live at university, whether the costs of accommodation, for a lot of our students is about the cost of commuting, and we know that transport poverty is an issue for our students trying to get to here. And when I say transport poverty, it's not just about money, that's also about connectivity. The bus services are atrocious. I'm working on that. I'm giving everyone a hard time I can. The train service could be better, and all these kind of things. And I know that's the case for our partners are on the live stream as well. So these things are really key, and I think it's about us being really transparent about that, having those discussions, but also showing where there is support. So the student loan system, for nurses, radiographers coming in, and paramedics, there is funding available now. There's an additional grant, and us making sure that that message gets out there, not just relying on kind of government sources or national bodies to that, but sharing those stories. And I think that's the last part I'd want to say is also about sharing stories. It's all very well to put out leaflets, but the most powerful thing is a student who's currently studying on the course talking about their experience. And we've got a video, I encourage you to have a look at it. It's one of our recent graduates who's a primary school teacher. Go into our YouTube site. It's got over 1 million views of it, and it's someone just explaining their experiences in their role. These things actually help people understand the difference it makes, and there's little stories there from international students as well, and from current students. We also get people to go out and explain what it's like to be a student. I know there's some ambassadors in the room who probably could share that better, but I think it's about those things, getting those challenges, and showing where the funding is as well. Got a really good money advice team here at Worcester. I dare to say one of the best, but I would say that. But they do huge amounts around the campaigns, but also they're there on open days, helping students to plan out their time before they arrive and can do a whole budget and plan with them. And I get those things are quite key.
Can I? So Ross probably has more to do with schools and colleges than me, but I have a real issue going back to jargon. Meg now knows what I'm going to say because I've said it about 100 times. The value for money debate, I really struggle with, because of course people expect value for money, of course. And I taught many years ago when there were no fees and very low fees, and I would have, well, there wasn't value for money because there was no money coming from the student, but I would still make sure that we delivered the best possible educational experience for students then. And I think in terms of schools and colleges, we work really hard with schools and colleges. We work really hard about raising people's aspirations. We say to them, this is what university is all about, this is what you can expect. Yes, of course, you can expect the support, but the discussion's much wider, I think. And it's important that we don't forget that. We don't forget why people want to come to university. And it's about a lot more than kind of getting a job at the end of it. University is about much, much more than that.
Great, cool. And now we've got another question that someone didn't want to read out, so I'll read out for them. They said, as an international student, how is the university supporting the SU to provide culturally competent activities for students from different countries?
Now, I really can hand that to Ross because he is responsible for international.
A really interesting question. Culturally competent, is that the words? I think that's a really interesting way to put it. I think there's lots of differences that international students have, but there's a huge amount of similarities as well. And I'm cautious at times of separating out the experience of an international student completely from that of a UK student, because actually those divisions can often be false, and I'm sure Erica's got probably more experience directly in that sense, but so I'm cautious about those things. That being said, there is certain things that is quite daunting at arriving in a country for the first time. I've only got the experience of a Scotsman coming to England. I still find some English quips strange. I'll explain to you afterwards why some of them are strange to me. But coming from, we've got a good number of students coming, for example, from the Indian subcontinent at the moment. They arrived this January. Arriving here in the cold, and everyone knowing where they're going and what they're doing, everyone understanding the coding of education. I think it's really important, yes, the academic side, and we're doing lots of work on that to make sure that those culturally differences are understood, but actually on the social side, so really interesting and fun things. So tonight, and I encourage you all to come to this, we've got the Lunar New Year celebrations. That isn't just for our Chinese students, that's for everyone in this room, everyone who arrived from the Indian subcontinent, to come and share culture, to understand, to share food, which is immensely important, share food with them, and understand why Lunar New Year's important. We did the same for Diwali. Diwali was, I think we ran out of food. And it's always a good sign when you run out of food. But the conversations I had was Chinese students asking our students from India about the food, about the culture, why they celebrate that. This grows you as an individual. It goes back into the classroom because you bring a wealth of experience into that. But also when you go out into the workplace, you have got an understanding of the world that some others don't have. It gives you a confidence as well for you to go and visit these places. You'll make friends, and I encourage you to make friends with all of our international students, and vice versa, our international students make friends with UK, because you'll get free bed and board across the world. I can tell you from experience. These kind of things are immensely powerful. The SU, for example, have been involved in all of our working groups. We've brought in, we've started to increase the number of international students, but have been embedded as well in the international student experience. So we ensure when people arrive, there's a little bit of orientation, but actually we mix people as quickly as possible. And what we don't do here in Worcester, for example, for international students, is we don't put all of them into the one halls. And some institutions do, because we think it's better that people are spread around, get to meet new people. But there's more for us to learn. So if there is things that we need to learn, I'm keen to hear. I've spoke to various people at Sam will know I'm always asking questions, always chatting to students to try and see how we can improve what we're doing. I also think the SU have been really keen to support on this agenda for us, really keen to understand and bring expertise from elsewhere. So I think we should be proud of the SU and what you've been doing.
Erica, I don't know if you want to add on to that as an international student.
Yeah, that was very good. An acknowledgement of knowing that there's a difference of cultural competence in here. So I think that the first step is to recognize that there is a gap of cultural competence in the UK in terms of students' unions. Now, one thing that I want to say is that how lucky you guys are to have a student union to represent your voice and to actually even champion your voice in a way that they are doing right now as you sitting here, and actually having a course rep position so that you can actually have a position where you can say, oh, we can do things better this way. International students don't know that because it's not a normal thing for us. And even though that in other countries, especially in Europe, more in Western countries, there are systems where they allow a student union, but it's not as high class as you have here. So you're very lucky. And then now the thing is, the student union recognizing that gap where the international student, when they come to this country, they identify like, oh, what is the student union? What is student voice? Why is it important? What is democracy? Why is this so important? It's one thing, because if because without student union and that democracy, then the person won't have that opportunity to voice their opinions. This is a very like obvious thing to say, but you know what I mean. So for me, it's more so that's the first step, and then once you acknowledge that step, then it's more about how can the university actually support the student union to make their services better and catered for every student from every country is really important. So one example is in China, the word student union is quite scary because of the political differences there is very different to here. So it's not as like very vocal and not as liberal. So it's identifying that, and then how does the student union actually help shape the narrative in a way that is more accessible for those students is an important thing. So I think it's just identifying those gaps. And then, the Chinese New Year celebration tonight, that you're having tonight, isn't it? It's a very good step into like a bigger picture in the future, is championing that and also bringing students together to learn learn about each other's cultures, and also just opening their mind. Because one of the things that is so important and that the student union enables is that union of different cultures together, and I think that's really important.
Well, I'm sitting next to two experts, so I don't really think I've got very much to add, other than, of course, if there is anything that you think we can do better, we will do it. And I suppose really just to observe, we were talking a bit earlier about our graduate attributes, and one of them is, and I know it sounds very kind of grand, it's around global citizenship, and I think it's a very small world. And I think the community is actually incredibly international. When you leave university now, you have to have those skills. We all have to have those skills. We all live in the world together. And I think if there's more that the university can do, and if there's more we can do to support the student union, of course we would. Very important.
And I think that's great, as even if you're not international students, as course reps, you must probably represent them on their course. And I think that's something really important to remember. And it kind of adds a lot of value to sessions like Val's about representing diverse populations. So look out for more information about that from us. But now I think we've got a question from Luke. Or Ben? We've had a substitution.
Messenger on this one. I'm alright, I've got a loud enough voice. I was wondering whether to do like Parliament. Thank you, Madam Speaker. So Luke's question is, how are you going to communicate the extra costs of courses such as trips and uniforms to prospective students?
Well, we've done lots of work on this, particularly around our website. Do you want to talk about fees and scholarships?
Yes. So it's a great question, Ben, stroke Luke. We've done a lot of work. Again, it goes back to the transparency bit of before someone arrives, they should know what the course costs are, what is embedded, so what you would expect to get in your course, what is additional and why it's additional. So if you go onto the course web pages, have a look for your courses, hopefully they should be all updated and with the relevant information. We have a really, I think, a good system. We audit back, so we check on it. We have what's called a fees, scholarships and bursaries group, where we scrutinise it, because one of the things that the student union sit on that committee, Harry's here somewhere, or Harry was here. Harry sits on it for the student union, and we'll ask those kind of questions. I think it's a really key part, because we've been having a bit of debate around some of this, of what should be included and what is additional, and if it's additional, should it impact then on the experience you have, your educational experience, your wider social experience. And where we can, we make sure things are absolutely embedded into it, and it's seen and it's transparent. There's some really exciting opportunities that come up throughout the time people are at university. So we've got students who are able to go out to visit India, we've got students in China, not at the moment, but in the other times of the year that students are in China, and in those kind of trips. And we're looking at ways of how we can support students. Sometimes the Access to Learning Fund will help with that, but it's also making sure there's an equivalent experience that can happen where you get that within your time.
And also, just to reassure you, so Ross talks about this committee, which is a really important committee because it has a kind of overview. So on the senior team, the university executive, we also review to see if it's consistent and fair. Because if you look at the number of courses we have and you look at the different kinds of subjects that we cover, it's actually incredibly tricky. And we try and make sure that we have a very consistent approach. I would just say, I mean, we've done lots and lots of work on this over the last year. But again, if that question, I don't know whether Luke is here, I don't know. But if that question springs from something in particular, then really flag it up. It's always really helpful to know because we can sort something out.
I did say don't shoot the messenger.
No, that's fine then.
Thanks, Ben.
Well, thank you, Ben. Now we've got a question from Ola. So many faces.
I don't know if I can speak too loud, but as we know that some of the courses there, you have students going out on placements at different stages in their course. How can we then achieve a positive communication with students on placement?
Oh dear, that's a question that implies we don't have a positive communication with students on placement. And it's tricky because obviously we have a huge number of courses where our students go out on placement. I think we do our very best. I think there are probably other ways we could communicate. So I think communication at the moment is probably largely through email when a student's on placement, although obviously we make sure that students are very well supported. I've no doubt we could do other things. And when I left here this morning, I had two students, one of whom I can see in the room, suggest a very, very good idea about how we might communicate better with students, which I'm going to look into and see if we can manage. That might also help with students on placement. But it's important for me that when students are on placement, they don't feel as though they're somewhere else. I know that might sound silly because literally they are, but they're still part of the university and supported by the university. That's incredibly important. And we're looking at, I don't know if you've heard, we're looking at this new medical school. And our students will be in the medical school, will be out on placement in very, very rural areas. And they will often be by themselves. And they'll be learning kind of new skills in quite a challenging environment. Lots of our students cope with that. So we're looking at, for example, improving technology so that we can actually talk much more immediately to our students and reassure students by those kind of technological means. It sounds really obvious, but it's something we actually haven't done much of before, and hopefully that will help. But good ideas welcome.
Great. And on the point of technological enhancements, we're actually looking at increasing communication digitally in the rep system next year. So I imagine that some of you that have placement students on your course, that becomes quite difficult to communicate in that time. But we're actually looking into that, and we look forward to maybe implementing something next year. So that's good. Great. So now we've got a question from Jess. Sorry, so many faces. Oh, hi, Jess.
How could we effectively encourage students to engage in providing feedback, especially when working full-time professionals make up the vast majority of students on a master's course?
How can we, do you want me to have I'll start. So the question was, how can we encourage students to engage with providing feedback, particularly those students who are working full-time and doing master's? Right, yeah. So I think there are difficulties. There are different difficulties with different courses, and I think probably there are different ways to address it. I think for me the thing about feedback is that it's really relevant when you know why you're giving it. So I think there's something about explaining to students that actually feedback is important because we can act on it, and making sure that we remember to feed back on the feedback. And I'm sure that's something we could get better at. There is a specific difficulty, I think, when you're working full time, and it's an experience, as I said earlier, that I've shared. So, but I also think that students who are working full-time, students on master's courses, are usually some of the most motivated students in the university. They are really keen to do well and really keen to engage with their course. So there's something about explaining why it's important, because it impacts directly on the course. There's also something, and it relates a bit to the earlier question, there's something about us making it as easy as possible for them to give that feedback, for us to capture it. I don't know if that helps. Ross might have more ideas.
The only thing I would add really is about building it into a culture of what we do. So it's just seen as being part of the course, as you're part of that. It's a partner in the learning. So in doing that, you're giving your feedback as you go. And where I've seen it been really cleverly done is it's built into the curriculum, so that there's opportunities for you to do that, both online and face to face. I also think it's also realising that feedback isn't always about the negative, and that's a really key part about having a healthy culture. So, for example, next week the Change Week activity that's going, I think is just fantastic. It's outstanding because it's not focusing on all the things that could be fixed. And lots of things can be fixed, of course they can. But it's also about what's going well, what should we do more of, and those kind of things are really also encourage people who don't always give feedback to come forward, because sometimes it's difficult to find those negative bits, but actually doing more of something good can have more impact than just changing a small thing. So I would encourage, again, the Change Week. I also really encourage that Change Week isn't just a physical thing that's on campus, it's online, and our students can do it whilst feeding the baby at home or out on placement, can engage with it. And again, if you can get that message out to the students that you're looking after, that there's multiple ways to do that, I think that would be really positive.
Thanks for the shout out for Change Week, Ross.
Can I just share a quick Change Week experience from last year, actually? So last year you had the post-it notes. You had a wall and people could put post-it notes on. And it was really interesting because we'd go and just read the post-it notes and you could see themes. So you could see where students across the university kind of had a particular theme that then I think you raised with us afterwards and we can start to act on. I think the most interesting post-it note just said something like spaghetti. So, and which I've absolutely no idea what that means. But what I would say about feedback is it really helps if you're clear in your feedback. And it comes back to that very first question that Sam asked about expectations, because then we can respond appropriately. It's that thing about managing expectations as well, I think.
Can I share a really quick anecdote? Sarah and I read every single comment in the NSS and the CES, and they all get picked up in events. There was one particular one which was about custard.
Yes,
and it came up, there was a complaint about the quality of custard. We changed that overnight.
We did.
It was a really easy thing to do, but it kind of proves the point is that they get looked at, people are engaged and understand it. Hopefully custard doesn't come up next week.
No, just lots of hash browns, I imagine.
Yes.
Does anyone else love hash browns? We've got a question down here at the front.
I just
would
like to add to that. What I found easy to be mum, no, I'm fine, I believe.
Okay.
And to be busy, and sometimes when you need to sit down and do questionnaire, it's daunting. What I thought that it would be as a suggestion, one a day, as you're entering your blackboard or something related with university, just one simple question. But if you can break down, for example, 1 month it's social month, and you would like to ask us questions about social things. So you will have 30 days where every single student entering and it will generate them just one question. How is your social life? Are you socializing or not? Yes or no? Just simple click. Sometimes we'll give you ideas. How many % of, for example, international students do socialize? Because you're talking a lot about diversity and socializing, how you can include students, because I'm now at MBA and it's full class of international people from all over the world. Some of them want to socialize, some of them want to stay away, but if you will look at them percentage wise, you will think we're doing very bad, but actually you're doing very well, because those who want, they're doing it. But you need to know who doesn't want to. Then you don't need to improve, which is really already great, because we know that to improve, sometimes we're pushing the things back. You see what I mean? I'm not sure.
It's a good point. So the first thing you're really saying is make it easy for us. Make
Yeah.
something really quick and simple. And I love the idea of a theme. I think that's a really good idea. And the second thing I think you're saying is don't fix what isn't broken. So there's something about, I think we often mean really well, and we're trying to do something from the best of motives. It may not be something you need or want. And we also need to kind of understand that. It's a good point.
Because, it's so many things which is really good to think about international students. It's more, support. Some of them, they do require one-to-one support, but they don't have that. It's just because we're spending so much time on other things, but by the end of the day, we're all here to learn, to have our education. I don't need to socialise.
And I think that's important, that we respect different people's approaches to
some
things.
of us need to just survive. That's I put on the board. But
And I think that's important, that there's services at the university that support as well, don't they? To help you with that.
And sometimes I need time to be left alone.
We hear you.
I
feel the same.
To survive again, but if you will give me nights that I can come with my kids and show there is mommy spending her time, please don't kill. I'll show you to hook to you can kill and say everything what you think why mommy is going like yesterday. Mommy, why it's night time, why are you going to oh well. But I mean, yes, we are motivated, but sometimes when I sit and read the messages, make yourself a break. You're doing too much. Ask every single one, but it's so hard to get that feedback. But one simple question to enter your blackboard, that will solve, I believe, many problems.
Okay.
And I also think that's why course reps are really important as well, to feed that back in situations like these as well. So that's
like I said,
fantastic.
the simple month, or even though if you want to spend that month, let maybe people choose. I want to talk about my work this month, if they will choose, and they will all month will have the random questions, which I believe help a little bit more to break that down, neither than we do have. Are you satisfied? Yes. Are you had a, oh my god, it's too much. You see what I mean? It's just.
And I think we've got the message.
Yeah, definitely. So, with a little bit of a change of speed now, we can't get away from this no matter what happens. We've got a question about Brexit.
Ooh.
On a very important day. So someone said, will Brexit affect the university? And I'm just wondering, Erica, also as well, how will it affect students nationally? So I don't know if you want to start on that.
Do you want to start on that?
Yeah.
How will it affect students nationally? Yeah. Well, where do I begin? I don't know where to begin. I'm not gonna lie. I think there's positives and negatives, right? So, in the National Union of Students, we have noticed the students students and young people in general, really didn't want Brexit to happen, purely because young people are more open to the world, and they're really scared of having that, like, the lack of freedom of mobility. So they want to, we want to be more open and to the world, and to explore the world and see other cultures. And now Brexit had that sort of message where there will be stronger borders, that there will be, that freedom is taken away from us. So that's one thing that will affect that. And now part of it, and linked to that, you have Erasmus. So just the other day, it was announced that there might not be, that we are not going to continue with Erasmus Plus, which is a big problem, because Erasmus gives so many opportunities for students to widen their perspective and a cultural perspective, was also having that experience outside of your home country is very important, because you get to see more than just what you're used to. And just like echoing a little bit about like how it's important to understand how different educational systems are, it's impactful for your life, and it increases your cultural competence. I like that word. And that's one, and that is a big problem. Erasmus, not continuing with the Erasmus Plus. I think that's quite problematic for me. Now, EU funding. So all the research programs that EU funds within the country, and Horizon 2020 and all of that, like if you remove them, then that means that you won't have that enriched like global competence in your curriculums, and just that stronger research and more. I don't know how to explain this very well, but I think you get the gist. It's more about how can we open our doors for external funding? If we don't open that, then we're just like one closed hub from the world. So for that, it's quite problematic for students in a way. And I think, and the big one that the media doesn't really talk about it much is xenophobia. So there's and people are starting to feel it a little bit, of like how Brexit sort of impacted the way that people think, or it enabled some sort of negative attitudes that were not very enabled before, but now they are, because it is like, in a sense that it feels like it's normal now, because okay, Brexit is going to happen, so now it's okay to behave the way that we behave, because this is our home country, and people that come here are going to take our jobs. This is one thing that baffles me. So we're going to take international people are going to take our jobs. They're using all our resources, all of that. There's no space for people coming from other countries, and I think that that's a very, very bad way to see it, and that's bad for students. The students and young people are the future, and what students and young people want is an open world. So that Brexit is just a start of going against that dream, of going against that future that young people envisioned, and I think that that's quite a big deal.
Yeah. I don't know if you want to add, Ross, if there's anything specifically with Worcester students.
So we've got about 500 students from the European Union who study with us here. I think my initial message on that is, I ask you, and I know you do, is to make them feel really welcome. Because today is actually more difficult for some than others about leaving the European Union. And I know there's lots of different views, and our students have lots of different views about leaving the European Union. But actually the principle of making people feel really welcome here at Worcester, I think, stands, and I know we do that, is making sure that they're part of our community, and we want to see them thrive, and it enriches all of us and everything that we do. Personally, I find it really difficult, and I've been honest in very different forums about leaving the European Union. And the reason I find it difficult is I was born European. I see myself as being Scottish, British, European. So and I'm not unique on that. But there's not much I can do about us leaving the European Union. That's a personal opinion of mine. But there's things you can do which make a difference for students and the community. And the things you can do is about lobbying your MPs about Erasmus Plus, and saying that it isn't good enough that 1 year is guaranteed. The Erasmus Plus means that students from this country can go out and visit and meet people and understand different cultures and enrich back home. The students from the European Union can come here and add to our campus and our experiences here, and the value in that is massive. So we should be asking for the Erasmus Plus scheme to stay. The research collaboration funding should remain, and we should be part of a lot of those joint collaborations, and there's methods. In fact, the Minister has been very positive about that. We just need to see some action around these things. And there's another part which I think sometimes gets lost, is there was a huge amount of hope and freedom that people had about working overseas during the summer after you finish your degree. And I think the government needs to, and this is for you to lobby, not me necessarily, but to lobby to make sure that those freedoms remain, that it's easy to go out and work in different parts of the European Union, that those freedoms still remain, and that people can come here and enrich the workplace as well. I don't think that's hugely contentious in some ways. That's about us having a vibrant economy, about having a society that's open to new ideas and open to new cultures. So I think those things aren't very controversial, regardless of my own views.
And perhaps just to bring it down to the sort of local level. So I think the first thing is that I've made up my mind to be optimistic. Okay, so you're going to have an optimistic view, because what choice do we have? And you and your colleagues are really in a fantastic position to influence what happens next. So to reassure you about Brexit, it has been a very long, difficult road, but we have known that it may be coming for some time, for years. And the university has made really good use of that time in terms of preparing for it. So will it impact on the university? Yes, it will. It will impact in all sorts of ways that you may not even have thought of. So something as simple as procurement. What does that mean? Well, it's when we contract with an external party to supply us with goods or services. Brexit will impact on that. It'll impact legally. It'll impact in lots of ways, but just to reassure you, it will not impact adversely on your time at Worcester, because we've planned carefully. We are very, very confident that you will not feel that impact. Wider impacts, yes, of course. Ross has already spoken about them, but I think it's partly up to us what happens next. I think we're a good, strong community. We're a diverse community, and I would anticipate that will only strengthen in the coming years.
Yeah.
Great. I feel really inspired now, Sarah. Good. Great. Now we've got a question from Andy, who's school rep for psychology.
Many students don't always see the relevance in specific tasks or the advantage of opportunities that are available to them. I think that more communication is needed to make it understood and relevant to them. How could this be done so that they would engage more?
I think we've got a recurring theme, haven't we, which is actually better communication. And I think I completely get that it's not just students. I think it's true of us as staff. I mean, we all sometimes think, why am I having to do this? And I think there's something about being much clearer about the why in terms of the relevance. For me, it's quite hard because I'm not quite sure which tasks you're talking about, but certainly if they're academic tasks, there is something about really clear dialogue, both at the start of the course and at the start of each assessment. There's something about explaining why you're being set that task, what skills it will help you develop, which learning outcomes it will help you to meet. And I just encourage you, if anybody's in that situation, you need to speak to academic staff, you need to speak to your course tutor or module tutor or your personal academic tutor. If there's something kind of systematically that we're not doing across the university about communication, then it will be really helpful for us to hear that, and we'll think about how we can remedy it.
I think the other thing I would say is we've got the student rep forums. I think it's probably quite a good thematic one for us to look at in a bit more detail and unpick a bit more to understand better.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that sounds like a good plan, and we'll look into that. And then we've got a question from Lisa as well. If you'd like to stand up, you can.
So, do you feel that the University Open Days offer a realistic representation of university life?
Do you want to start, or shall I? I think we've both probably got the same view, Ross.
Yeah, go on, you go.
Well, I think it's really interesting. So Open Days, I think it's a bit like a job interview, perhaps. It's very difficult in the space of a morning to actually encapsulate what university life is all about. The big thing that I think Open Days don't show is how hard you have to work when you're here. And it's really quite tricky for us to do that. So open days, we want to be truthful, we want to talk to you about the course, we want to talk to you about what you can expect. Will an open day give you the realistic picture of what you're going to feel like on a Friday afternoon in January when you've got 3 assignments to hand in and you've got a job to do? No. And I think that's not the purpose of the open day. So I think the purpose of the open day is really, it's about information, and it's about having the opportunity to ask the questions you want to ask of staff who'll be teaching you. So it doesn't give you the full picture. And to go back to my analogy, it is a bit like a job interview. You know, you're just at the start of your relationship with the university at the open day.
Can I ask you a question? This is a risky one. Put your hand up if you came to an open day. Oh, that's good. Wasn't that risky?
It's interesting, though. It's much more than
I'd
you'd
have thought.
expect.
Yeah. I think it'd be useful for our comms team to come and speak with reps a bit more about that, and just to get an understanding of what you thought of the open day. I think you're right. Of course, it's not going to be exactly how your experience will be at university. I think it's very difficult to replicate that. The bit that certainly I've heard the Vice-Chancellor, Sarah, and I all say is speak to students when you're here on open day. And I kind of make the joke that we don't pay them enough to lie. It's not quite the case. We pay very well for our student ambassadors, but it's the bit where students are the best people sometimes to ask about that, bit of the pressures, the challenges that there might be, but being on placement. Let's say you're a paramedic and you're out on placement, you've got assignments to get in, you've got family to look after. I think having those conversations make a difference. But the open days, again, on experience, I think the open days we do here have got a nice balance between that information giving and an opportunity to meet students. So kind of credit to them, but I think they're always learning. The comms team are always open to taking more from it.
I think as well, you guys are ambassadors for the university in like everything that you do as well. Obviously you interact with other people when you go home and stuff like that, and I think that is also a form of relaying expectations to people about what it is actually like to be a Worcester student, and I think that's also really important to remember as you guys as well. We've got another question as well from someone who says, with advances in technology, do you think the way students will learn in the future will be different?
Well, I have to confess to feeling a bit old school on this, having been teaching for a very long time. I think technology is a fantastic teaching tool that we need to make more of. I don't think technology is a substitute for really good teaching. So there's something for me about getting the teaching right, and technology is a means of delivering that. What I do think we need to do much more of is to make it much easier for students to access things via technology, to feedback via technology. I think some of the things we do are really interesting, like Collaborate, these kind of online classrooms and things. They're all great. But the thing I would say is that technology can't replace that kind of interaction between staff and students, colleagues. And I think that will always be that kind of one-to-one contact or small group contact has been a feature of our education at Worcester for years. And I personally would be very sorry to see that change.
Great.
I think there's a big part of it being it's a facilitator.
It's a tool.
It's a powerful tool if you get it right. I think where I've seen universities get it wrong is they throw huge amounts at it and replace those interactions that Sarah talks about. So I think it's about getting the balance right. The other part of it is making your life easier. So if you can get information on the move, things like the student app, which we've done a lot of work on, but we need to do more. The careers portal where you can access that wherever you are, log information on it, those kind of things. The more we can do that, just making your life easier, where it means that you're not having bits of paper everywhere, you're able to access information on the move. I think that makes a difference. Also that you don't have to physically come into places like First Point all the time to get the things you need to support you. So those kind of things that certainly we've worked really hard to improve, and I'm sure there's more to do.
Does anyone have any questions or comments on this sort of topic? Yeah. Sorry, over there. By Simon.
Different topic.
Okay. Does anyone have anything just before we move on? Yeah.
Is there anything I'd say with like with new technologies and stuff? I'd say probably like consistency is the like most important thing, because like it's good, you know, saying, oh, we're using this new app, but if it's only used twice and then not used again, I think people don't buy into it as much in the future if you suggest other alternatives. So I think if it's consistently used, then people are more likely to engage with it as well.
Yeah. There's something about embedding it, isn't there? And I think it's what I think we don't want to do is have a really good gimmick. Yeah. There's only a point if you're actually embedding it across a course, I think, and it's useful.
Yeah, and I think that's really important about it being useful.
Yeah.
And I think that there's so much good content, and I'm not sure. So Ross mentioned about all the different services that are available, and I wonder whether do you think people know about these things and just don't access them, or don't know? And I think that's a question to think about and maybe come back to us later about, in terms of the people on your course and whether they know about things. Because I think some of the feedback that we get is about directing people to the services that are already here as well as developing new ones as well. Yeah, should we get back over there?
What model leaders can do for students to have a better understanding on how to do a better assignment, since the feedback given on grades are by the end of the semester?
So, are you talking about earlier? How can we kind of feed forward? That's the question, isn't it? Really.
Better understanding, or because I know some students that think. I know some students that think they are actually doing critical thinking on their assignments, and when they see their feedback, they actually don't. They are being too descriptive.
Yeah. So there's something about having. I mean, I hate to say communication again, but it actually is communication again. There's something about, first of all, being really clear. We're back to clear expectations, and then there's something about feedback at a really early point. So one of the things that we've done this year is that we now have a formative piece of assessment for our first years. We have it within the first 4 or 5 weeks of term. It might be a bit longer if we've got students on courses where they're on placements and things. But basically the idea of that is it's formative, which means you don't get graded on it. It doesn't count towards anything. And the idea is that we start to explain at a really early stage what's expected. The other thing for me, and it ties into your point really about jargon, there's something I think more for us to do, to look at the way we give feedback. So there's something about the content of the feedback. I think sometimes we're so used to marking. You know, we've done it for many years. We forget that actually the student reading it doesn't have that experience, and we need to explain things differently. So that's the first thing. I also think there's something about changing the way that we actually give feedback. So going back to technology, I think sometimes it's really effective to record feedback. So as you're marking something and it's really fresh in your mind, often that feedback is much more impactful on a student. But in terms of what you're talking about, I think it's largely timing.
Yeah, that's where it comes.
I think we've got a couple of people in the audience that have got their hand up.
I think that links as well that we just have to turn it in, so use the technology to
Yeah.
do the feedback. And actually when you receive it on a computer, what that translates into what they want to say to you is completely different. So it's actually getting both kind of sides.
That's interesting. I think we need to do much more. I think some courses use Turnitin really well in the way that we wanted it to be used, which was really as a kind of formative tool. It was to help you. But I'm sure there's more we could do to make that more consistent. Yeah, absolutely. I'll take that point. Yeah.
Oh, we've got quite a few hands. So if we go to Emily first. Run, Tim. I'll pick one each side and you can keep running back.
Hello. I was just going to ask about all the technology that we're using. As student nurses, we have 5 different platforms, and then you're also talking about an app. There's all these other things that we can use. Is there a way that we can make it more simple, that we can get a communication, like we can communicate with each other? Because as we're on placement, we don't talk to each other very much, and we are in such a wide area. I'm by myself. I know many other students are by themselves on placement, and it's really hard to keep that contact with you.
Yeah.
Like, you do feel like you're on placement and that's it. So is there a way that we could maybe use something a bit more simple, like text or Facebook, or something that we use day to day to keep in contact with people, to spread positive messages and any information that, you know, we're here if you need us.
Yeah.
Because we're not getting a lot of that at the moment.
It absolutely, and it touches on a couple of points other people have made, and the thing I was saying about the medical school. So we're conscious that we do need to devise a means for you to do that. I think part of it comes back to us perhaps trying a bit too hard. So if you've got 5 different systems, you know, and 6 apps or something, then it must be very difficult. And I suspect there is something simpler we could do. What would be really helpful is knowing what you need, and then we can start to strip away some of the things that you don't need. I think sometimes it's an excess of enthusiasm, but really we'll only get to the bottom of it, I think, by talking about it, working out what you want.
How would I go about it? Would I speak to the course lead or yourselves?
It would be, so I think the best way to go about it would be initially to talk to your course lead, but I'll also talk about it actually to the head of school, because I'm meeting him next week, so I'll mention that you've raised it if you're happy for me to mention it. Yeah.
Great, fantastic. We've also got one final question here as well, and it says, how can students and the university become more eco-friendly to face the climate issues that we face? And I don't know whether, Erica, you want to comment on the student body as a whole and like mobilising students to become more active in terms of fighting against climate change.
Yeah, I think that it's a little bit similar to Brexit, where young people and students actually recognize the issue of climate, of the whole like climate change as a big problem, better than older generations. So now it's just up to you, right, of how much you want to engage with your students' union and in your university to hold both into account and to see where are the problems that identify the problems that you have on your campus, see where things are more eco-friendly and keep it that way or make it better, and then identify the things that are less eco-friendly and then challenge your university and your student union to work towards to make it better, to change that. At NUS, we do a lot of research around sustainability, and we do a lot of gathering feedback from students of seeing like what is relevant and what is not. And because of our involvement with the climate change and the climate justice and getting the youth and students to get more active in the pressing issues now, because obviously like if we don't do anything about it, like then we only have one Earth, right? So we have to. This is really important. So the NUS is now, because we did all of those things. There is more institutions changing to, I think Goldsmiths did something about banning beef, something like that. There's a lot of institutions wanting to pledge for carbon neutral facilities and all of that. So it's more about you guys giving us the feedback of what do you think is important in order to tackle the climate change, and because that is one of our priorities. So I don't know if you guys want to say something about the perspective of your institution.
Yeah, I mean, in fact, I think we're incredibly fortunate here at Worcester. The Vice-Chancellor, Professor David Green, made a commitment, I think it must have been a decade ago, about really ahead of a lot of other institutions and saying this is a real priority for Worcester. And it was in the strategic plan back then. And I dare you to look at other institutions and try and find the level of detail that was put down. That is then, I think, given us the product of where we are now at Worcester, which is this year we won. This is a round of applause moment. We're number 1 in the UK for sustainability in UK and Ireland in the Green Gown Awards, and we're going into the World Green Gown Awards. Really top of it. That's the round of applause moment. You know, I'll give you a promise. Yesterday, we were able to announce that we're number 1 in the country in terms of improvement around recycling. In 1 year alone, we improved recycling by 28%. That's saving tons and tons of rubbish not going off to landfill. When you yeah, you go on. And these things are really important, but actually on the ground level, some of the things that I think we could be better at communicating is about how we save energy as a university. If you look above you, these are new lights that are in here. These have got sensors in it which spot when daylight's coming in, when it doesn't need to be on. You'll find that they'll dim near a door when the door's light's coming through onto it. The payback on these, if I remember rightly, is 2.5 years. So putting in the new kind of lighting, you'll find this across the university. We've got PV on our roofs, which is the solar panels. We've got that across the board. At times of the year, we are not taking anything at all off of the grid. And in our new buildings, we go for the top rating in all occasions. So when you look at our new art house, we got what's called BREEAM rating, which says that, in fact, recycling buildings is one of the most environmentally friendly things you can do. And you'll be aware from the local newspaper, we bought a building down by the river. It's currently called Barrow's House. The fact that we're recycling that building, that we'll be investing in that, is the most environmentally friendly to do rather than building a brand new building. But actually then to make sure when it is there, it's a sustainable institution. The things that we could be better at is, I think, as you walk into reception, you should see how much energy is being saved. You should understand that in your halls. You are active participants in this, and part of our success has been about students, but I want to see more students seeing that across the board. So it's a story of success here at Worcester, but I think there's more to do. And in fact, the governors and the vice-chancellor announced a climate emergency only this academic year. And that's not about us, that's about everyone in the community being part of that. So I encourage you to get engaged and involved in the various ways the Student Union and others have been promoting.
Yeah, so as part of our governance review, we're actually looking at making a sustainability network, which means that students can get involved in and directly impact the sustainability activities that the SU and the university do. So that's something to look out for, and that's one of Tim's sessions this afternoon. So if you haven't signed up for it and you're interested, go and have a look. You've got a question? Yeah.
In that sustainability, is travel to and from universities of students included? Because being asked to come for an hour at 4 o'clock on Monday doesn't seem very energy efficient to me. It takes 2 hours to get here, at 4:15 on Monday. Timetabling for the last 3 years has been awful. I don't see how it's that hard to improve again the energy efficiency of the university by just having a bit more. You know, it's an hour lecture on one day.
So I think just to summarise for the live stream in terms of the noise, so I think the question was about timetabling and how it could help with commuter students and making them more energy efficient and
yeah. I think there's multiple things in there, but on the timetable one, you shouldn't really be having a 1 hour lecture, just 1 hour lecture in a day. That doesn't sound right. And if you feed that back through the course leader, they're able to look at the pattern within the timetable and look at that. So if you can feed that back, that would help. I think the wider point is transport to and from university is an issue. When you look at the carbon neutral targets, there's 3. The third one is about the kind of commuting, if you like, the travel plan for an institution. It's a big challenge for us when we're such a rural communities around us. The public transport could be better. So there's a lot of work we need to do around that. We are doing that, and I think some of that's a conversation with yous about how we do it. So there's more to be done around that.
For the last 3 years it's been up and down, but this year, even after feeding back for 2 years, it's worse than it was.
Which course are you?
With biomed.
Biomed, okay.
Can I just say, timetabling is really important, and absolutely we'll look at it. But I don't want to end on timetabling. And just going back to sustainability, when I came in this morning, we had that fantastic photograph of everybody holding up those sustainable development goals. If you turn around and look at the notice board, and I apologise to our live stream audience, what we have is a series of pledges that people have written up. And the thing about those, which is I think really remarkable, they're not about great big things. The university is doing everything it can. I'm sure we can do more about sustainability, but those are things like buy a reusable coffee cup. There's something as well about individual responsibility for all of us that I think is really important.
Definitely, and I agree. Have we got any more questions? So we've got a couple more minutes left. I was just wondering if anyone had any burning questions. I think we've got one there too. Just
it's a bit of an odd one, but what support do you offer students that are homeless before they start university and then spend the whole of uni in student housing, and then when they leave? Because I am homeless and I've kind of tried student services, but it's kind of hard knowing what's going to be there when you leave, because you don't want to just be thrown into the world and live in a cardboard box.
No, absolutely. No, thank you for the question. It is a really difficult one nationally, and we've been working nationally on some of this, as you can imagine. The part of it is making sure that we understand that before someone starts. So it's about us having those conversations really early. And we've done some of that around open days and on the website, but people coming forward, for example, those who are care leavers, which is often the case in some form or had care experiences. There's a nuance, but it's the same issues often present around it. We have a care leaver action plan, actually a carer or estranged student, so that's someone who's not hasn't got the family support around them. And people at Val Yates is in the room work on that. So it's about how we can support beforehand, understanding things like the 365 days a year accommodation is available. There's a named contact for someone who can speak to. So it's not, you're not darting around speaking to different people in the student services area. But then you're right, it's that part when you're leaving university and getting there. And we've got some housing advice. I think we probably need to have more conversations with those students about how we absolutely get that right. But I encourage you, and it sounds like you are speaking to the student service team, you catch me after as well. I'd be really keen to have a chat with you as well. It's an area as a university we're really keen to support. We want students to come in, and the last thing I ever want is a cliff edge for anyone. It's also, I mean, just more generally about, I think we're outstanding when it comes to our support. There's more to do, but we're outstanding. And I'm always worried about that cliff edge, about when someone finishes at university and then goes out into, whether it be the workplace or into accommodation. And we're doing quite a lot of work about that, how we support students in the exiting university, if you like. There's opportunities. It's more than just careers. It's preparing people. We do quite a bit on disability, for example, around that. So I think it's an area of development for us, but we're really keen to have a chat at some point.
I think that's a really important point to finish on, in terms of that as course reps, you not only feedback about your course and the experience of your peers, but actually about student experience as a whole, and how things like the support services can be adapted to, you know, benefit everybody and every university student. So I just want to say, really, thank you guys for being course reps, because actually you guys are the ones that make the change. And without you, things might change and they might not actually be right, but with you guys it makes it right. So I think you should give yourselves a round of applause. And whilst we're on thank yous, I'd like to say thank you to the panel. So thank you very much for coming today. I think everyone's found it really, really useful, and it's really opened up the conversation and the communication about expectations and value for money. So we now have lunch in the hangar. I forgot what time of day it was. And you're all welcome to come and join us. And also make sure you catch Tim, Abby or I if you'd like to volunteer in Change Week. It's a great way to talk to even more students.